you have to be humble. You have to lead with humility, because what's going to happen is your ego is going to prevent you from learning, whereas humility is going to accelerate growth and learning. So for your own sake, you should be humble. Right? In the military, I'm sure we stole that from the army. The most senior at the time, it looks like we steal a bunch of ideas from the army, but the 3 C's of leadership, right?
Welcome to Unspoken Security, the raw and gritty podcast for security professionals who are looking to understand the most important issues related to making the world a safer place, including intelligence-driven security, risks and threats in the digital and physical world, and discussions related to corporate culture, leadership, and how world events impact all of us on and off our keyboards. In each episode, host AJ Nash engages with a range of industry experts to dissect current trends, share practical insights, and address the blunt truths surrounding all aspects of the security industry.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Unspoken Security. I'm your host, AJ Nash. I spent 19 years in the intelligence community, mostly at NSA. Been building and maturing intelligence programs in the private sector for, 10, 11 years now, something like that. I'm passionate about intelligence, security, public speaking, mentoring, and teaching. I also have a master's degree in organizational leadership from Gonzaga University. Go Zags. So I continue to be deeply committed to servant leadership. And this podcast, it brings all these elements together with incredible guests to have authentic, unfiltered conversations on a wide range of challenging topics. It's not your typical polished podcast. My dogs make occasional appearances. People argue and debate here. They swear. I've been known to. And that's all okay. Please think of this podcast as a conversation that you might hear at a bar after a long day in one of the larger cybersecurity conferences that we all go to every year. These are the conversations we usually have when nobody's listening. Now, today, I'm really excited. I'm joined by Bob Fabien, BZ Zinga. So he's a cybersecurity executive, Naval Information Warfare Commander, host of the Leadership and Success podcast. He's got over 28 years of experience across the defense sector. He's got Silicon Valley startups, higher education. He's been the CISO at Santa Clara University, virtual CISO for Fortune 500 companies. He's held senior security roles at Groupon, Pivotal Software, and at the Defense Language Institute, where I'm a graduate of. They're probably not very proud of that. I wasn't very good. In the Naval Reserve now, he serves as commanding officer of a 72-member unit supporting Naval Network Warfare Command. He's also a Forbes Technology Council member, EC Council certified CISO Hall of Fame inductee, and serves as a board advisor for the United Cybersecurity Alliance and the Arizona Cyber Initiative. So I don't know how I tricked him into coming on the show. Don't tell him he's too good to be here, but he definitely is. BZ, is there anything you want to add to that bio?
No, not really. But in the room, I was saying I was really pleasantly surprised. Yesterday, they selected me as a top 50 global thought leader and influencer for cybersecurity in 2026. That was by Thinkers 360.
Wow.
So it's a great honor and privilege. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. I mean, the resume speaks for itself, right? I mean, you've been doing this a long time. And interestingly, you've got that military background, the government space. You've also got the private sector. So those are different environments for those who haven't been in both spaces. It's unusual to find somebody with such depth and breadth of knowledge and experience. And specifically, not just in the tech side, but the leadership piece, right? I mentioned in the opening that I have a master's in org leadership. I like to get that in the show, but sometimes we don't have that. Some episodes are just tech this and they're interesting stuff. Don't get me wrong. I shouldn't say just, but I really love having an opportunity to talk more about the people aspects. And so today we're going to talk about the dangers of performative leadership, particularly in tech. And I'm very excited about this. I really appreciate you being here because I couldn't think of a better expert to talk to on the subject, really. But as we jump in, when we talk about performative leadership, to you, what does that mean? What are we talking about?
Well, so thanks again in the intro. So really, when you look at my career, it's really mainly, right, the US Navy and the reserve component as an information warfare commander, but also Silicon Valley, especially the last 12 years, right? So basically, I went from the Navy cyber war room to the Silicon Valley boardroom. So what I do care most about, especially in cybersecurity today, I think is leadership. Leadership that actually shows up for people, right? Not optics, not slogan, not quarterly talking points, but real leadership rooted in values that don't shift when they become inconvenient. I think principal leadership is extremely important, especially now in the age of AI, because AI might be able to do a lot of things that women can do, but AI absolutely cannot lead, right? We need people to do that. So I know that leadership isn't easy, When it's popular, it's revealing when it costs you something, right? And that's where really performative leadership quietly does most damage, I think. So when you ask, when we talk about performative leadership, what are we really talking about? So in my mind, when I talk about performative leadership, I'm really talking about leadership that prioritizes appearance over accountability. Two different things. So it's when leaders say the right things publicly, but they make very, very different decisions privately. Right? There is incongruence. There is absolutely no integrity. So it's values on a website. And Silicon Valley, almost every business I've worked for, they have those flyers, but the core values on the wall, but they never hardly live by those. They don't hire fire by those. It's extremely rare. They usually, would promote people who have high performances, bring in the money, regardless of how they add or take away from the culture. But anyway, so what I am saying is it is really for a lot of businesses, it's not values in a budget. I guess that's another way to say it. So, for example, DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. Yep. It was really big, after George Floyd in 2020, and now that we have a brand new administration who's against it, all of those organizations, most of them, they've changed their mind. Like they never really believed in it. So it was just performative. So they didn't have any stand whatsoever, any skin in the game. They didn't mean what they said, but they said what they believe was the right thing to say in order to make a quick buck. That's pretty much, if we have to be honest, that's really what happened. Right? So I think it's not just DI statement or mental health post or people first language that disappear the moment they become politically uncomfortable or financially inconvenient, like it is right now in America. So to me, performative leadership is really transactional. But so it asks, what's popular right now? What protects me? What helps my brand right now? And then if it changes tomorrow, then they will just change, on a dime. But I think the real danger with that, though, especially in cybersecurity, is people, they really can spot inauthenticity instantly, right? When trust erodes, psychological safety disappears. And when people don't feel safe, they stop speaking up. That's really a big, big danger. I can't remember who said this, but someone had said, you really have to be seriously worried when the people in your organization, those who are more engaged, stop talking. That is very, very, very dangerous because that's really how breaches happen. That's how risk are found silently, right? In security, silence is never neutral. I believe it is dangerous, at least from my opinion. So if performative leadership is about optics, I believe the natural question becomes, in contrast to that, what are the indicators of genuine leadership?
Yeah, no, I think you make a really good point. I think, by the way, and I have the advantage of Google. Tim McClure, I believe, might be the first person who made that quote. Yes. Yeah, a few people have. I have the advantage of Google. I'm actually Googling it as you asked. I knew the quote too. But it is a famous quote. When the people who were engaged, the people most passionate, when they stop talking, that doesn't mean things are great. A lot of people are like, oh, silence is good. Nobody's really raising concerns. No, that's probably a really bad thing. When people stop raising concerns, they don't feel like they're safe to do so anymore, or they feel like leadership doesn't care. They've given up on trying to convince anybody. Quiet isn't necessarily a good thing. But I think it's great you mentioned that, you're talking about performative. You made a really good point. That the winds of change with DEI, right, is a good example of that. Some organizations went all in on it, and then when the winds of change came through on politics, they went all out on it. You go, okay, well, they never cared. And some have stuck, and said, no, this is who we are. This is who we believe in. Just as when the sweep came in, some said no and didn't. And so that's their values, right? They didn't move with the winds. This is who they are and what they believe in. For better or worse, people can make their choices there, but this is who they are. I think those who move back and forth, you recognize there's like an ethical issue there. They're doing what's convenient, right? What's in their best interest, they believe, whether it's politically or economically. And It's unfortunate because, in my opinion, you can't really walk a lot of that stuff back. Now, that isn't to say people don't learn. You can change. That's fine. You can change once, I suppose. But if you keep changing back and forth, it's pretty clear you're just going where the flow is, and that you don't really have an ethos of your own. And so, I'm curious, when we talk about that, what happens to an organization when the leaders abandon values, when they're under pressure and they abandon those values? What are the long-term pieces, that become an issue with that?
Yeah. And I believe from your background similar to mine, you were in the military, you went to DLI, and then you had experience at the NSA too. So if I was going to ask you, what were your core value as a service member so many years after you've left the military? Sure. What would you say your core values?
Integrity, service before self, and excellence in all we do. That's exactly. Air Force core values.
US seller is honor, courage, commitment. And it doesn't matter which seller you wake up in the morning or late at night, they will tell you exactly the same thing. Today, 20 years from now, or 20 years ago. It's really built into us, right? It is core to who we are. That's who I am as a seller. It's not just something I am performing. It's really who I am at my core. And I speak about 8 to 12 times or so every year. I go to security conferences and summits. Sometimes I'm a keynote speaker. And I love to ask this question. Who knows who the core values of their organization is? Except for people in the military, 99% of people have absolutely no idea. Most of them may have, I think there is something about caring, there is something about respecting the customer, but they don't know what those core values are. And it is really, really sad because if you don't know what your core values are, how in the world are you making decisions? And here I'm talking to executives, CISOs, CIOs, CTOs, people in charge. If you don't even know what your core values are, how in the world do you make decisions every day? What are you working toward? What do you represent? What do you stand for? So again, in the military, the Air Force, even though I think is a little bit subpar, but not the Navy, the Army, all of the other branches. So we know exactly who we are, what we stand for. It's drilled into us day in and day out. And I think that's really what we need because that's how we should be making all of our decisions, especially when it's critical and especially when it's under pressure, right? And I think the specific question you asked was what happened, right? So can you ask
what happens if the leaders abandon those values? When they're under pressure and they go ahead and give up those values, what happens to the organization then?
Well, you really lose integrity, trust. And I think trust is probably one of the most difficult thing, to really earn. My mentor taught me rank is rented. No matter what your position is right now, eventually you're not going to be in that seat of power anymore. But trust is earned. And leadership is really how people feel long after you have left your post. Really the impact you've had on people, how you made them feel. That's really what leadership is all about. And that's based on trust. And if people cannot trust you, they cannot work for you. Now, of course, one of my primary mentors, Dr. John C. Maxwell, I've learned so much from him. One of the books, I'm just going to make a quick plug here.
Sure, go ahead.
The 5 Levels of Leadership. Great book. It talks about level number 1, which is positional leadership. Right? That's when people are going to obey you just because of your position. You have a CIO, the president, the CEO, or whatever title is. So they're going to do whatever you say because they need a paycheck.
They don't have a choice. It's not leadership then. It's just they're going to do what they have to do. It's hierarchical,
It's the lowest form of leadership. But when people trust you, when they like you, when they want to follow you, then you go from level 1 to level 2. And that is so important because then they see someone who is equitable, who is fair. You may have high standard, and many of my bosses have had very, very high standard, but you are fair and you are persistent and you treat absolutely everybody the same. That really builds trust because your people should never wonder, where do you stand? Is the boss on this side or that side? They should know exactly where you stand on things that matter all the time. No exception. That builds trust. They trust you because they know they can rely on your word. It's not wishy-washy. One way you are for diversity and the next day you are not. Like, who are you, right? So that is why I think it's so very important to know exactly who you are, what you stand for, and really live your life by those core values. Live a life of congruency, right? Where what you say and what you do align. Another way I've learned that in the Navy is when they say that the audio doesn't match the video. So whatever you're saying and what I'm saying, doesn't match. There will be no trust. And those people, again, they're going to do what you say because you give them a paycheck, but as soon as they can, they will find another boss because they cannot trust you.
100%. Well, and you made a really good point. You talked about core values, right? And a lot of people don't know the core values of their organization. And as you said, from a leadership standpoint, what are you doing then? How are you making decisions? And what it comes down to, I think, a lot of times is then you have leaders in different organizations. They're applying whatever their values are. And therefore, you have this whole inconsistency across an organization, which people have seen. You transfer from one part of the organization to another, and everything changes. Things that were fine aren't anymore. Things that were off limits are things you do now. So you don't have a culture that's corporate wide. You have one that's just business unit wide. But the other thing I've seen is that you have, obviously the leaders don't necessarily know what the core values are. And neither does the team. I've seen the opposite happen though, where I've seen people work against core values And you may see somebody who does know the core values, and hey, this is a direct violation of our core values, and they resist, or perhaps it even becomes an HR issue, depending on what kind of core values we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And have you seen some of this? And I'm going to tell you my point first, just so I don't set you up. I've seen that not go very well. I've seen organizations that have these core values on the wall, and then you see a high-ranking leader who clearly violates those core values, just something that's unethical. Yes. The person who is affected, following proper protocol, hey, I believe in the core values. I studied these. I believe in this company. I'm following the process. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, that person's not there in a few months. It's not officially retribution, but funny enough, the organization ends up valuing the person who they decide is more valuable to the org, which is this higher leader, which again takes away all your credibility as an organization. I think I've seen it happen, and every time it happens, I've seen people go, well, the core values in a company don't matter. As you said, most people I don't think really necessarily believe them anyway. They're just things you put on a wall, but it ends
where
right.
Your most engaged employees, they go silent. They
exactly.
Go quiet.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to see. And so the other thing is when we talk about silence, so this is a tough one. There's always been difficult times, but I'd say we're in difficult times right now, right? However you want to look at it, almost everything is political in some form or fashion now. There used to be the old days, it was like, hey, don't talk about politics or religion at work, right? And most people it's almost impossible now because things that weren't political are now. You like Nike. So wait a minute, somebody's boycotting Nike now. Oh, it's a really good, cup of coffee. Well, where'd you get it from? It's impossible to have conversations without something feeling political, right? But some things are happening in this country, and I have a question about neutrality versus ethics, right? So, we're dealing with whether it's racial issues, whether it's the immigration issues, possible government overreach, some of these things that are happening. And I just saw a story the other day, about corporations, CEOs that are finding themselves in a difficult position of, you don't want to lean too far out, into the politics. You don't want to do that. You don't want to upset the government. You don't want to upset, you want to be able to sell to everybody, right? So people from all spectrum, you want to be able to sell to them. So you don't want to pick a side sometimes. But sometimes doing nothing is picking a side, right? Some things aren't about politics. They should be about human rights and ethics and things. So I'm leading up to a question with a lot of talking, but is neutrality ever ethical for leaders, and specifically for cybersecurity leaders, or is it one of the things we have to take a stand and live with that stand?
So when it comes to neutrality, I do want to be careful because I do believe that you should focus on your mission, the mission of your organization, and what your thing is. Not everybody is working on something else. Kind of swim in your own lane. I think that's definitely a thing. However, having said that, as a leader, I think it goes back to your core value, what you stand for. Martin Luther King is probably one of the best person who says that. When he says that for those who are silent, he says something like, injustice. What did he say? MLK said something about.
I believe it said injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Something to that effect, right?
That is exactly it. Because when you see injustice and you don't say anything, by you being neutral, basically you've made a decision. When harm is foreseeable and you stay silent in the face of known risk, that is a decision, and often the most dangerous one. So what I would say, really fall back to your core value. As you know, in the military, we always, train the way we fight, or we fight the way we train. So whenever we are under extreme pressure, we always fall back to our level of training, right? So I guess what I am saying as a leader, you need to know exactly who you are, what your core values are, and if something is just unjust and doesn't align with those core values within your organization, as a leader, you do have to speak up. You cannot just ignore it, act as if that didn't happen. Right? Another thing that one of my skippers, a mentor, told me was, especially when I became a commanding officer, he says, as a CEO, if you see something that is misaligned with your standard, right, and then you don't say anything and you just let it go by, that becomes
that's the standard, right? Yep.
Yes. So that's why but I think it really comes down to caring about your people, right? And maybe we say mission first, people always, but you really cannot accomplish your mission without your people, and you really truly have to care for your people. I think there is no way around that. So that's kind of where I would stand on
right.
that.
I absolutely agree. And this is, violent agreement, right? This is part of the reason I was very excited. Again, my background in leadership, as organizational leadership was servant leadership, at Gonzaga. So I'm a big believer in people. I've always said, if you take care of the people take care of the mission. I was drawn to that line of education from my military service because I worked with some really good leaders. But I also worked for a lot of people that I thought were just managers. And you can see the difference, right? For anybody in the Air Force, I don't know if the Navy does the same thing, but in the Air Force, there are chiefs and there are E9s. Chief is an E9 rank, but if you're called an E9, it's about as big an insult as it gets. And people won't call a chief E9 to their face.
Same thing in the Navy. Yeah. Although in the Navy, I would say 99.9999% of E9 are actually chief. But from time to time, you would find someone is like, I don't know, what did you make chief? I have no idea. But,
exactly. And I learned from that and said, I want to get better at this. I want to get more knowledgeable. And I was lucky enough, I was practicing servant leadership before I knew the term when I was in the Air Force. And I was lucky enough to, because I modeled after some really good leaders. But it does make it difficult because you do have to take these ethical stands. If you want to be a leader, first of all, people won't trust people if they don't believe you're going to be standing up for anybody or anything. Then there's no point in following you. But I just found it to be hard to stomach when I saw people who shifted too much. You're like, oh, they don't really have an ethos. They're just self-serving.
Yeah.
It
and also from what you're saying, AJ, I mean, I completely agree. If I can plug another book.
Sure, plug away.
Gates of Fire, Stephen Pressfield.
Gates of Fire.
Page 412 is one of the best definition of leadership I have ever read. So this is the servant talking about his king who died during this great battle. So the conquering army is like, okay, what's up with your king? I've never seen this because they were way outnumbered. Basically, they fought to death. It was a suicide mission, but still his people followed him there. So, and then the conquering king asked the servant, and then his answer, I will tell His Majesty what a king is. No, he's talking about his king who just passed away, valiantly fighting for his people with his men. He says, a king does not abide within his tent while his men bleed and die upon the field. A king does not dine while his men go hungry, nor sleep when they stand at watch upon the wall. A king does not command his men's loyalty for fear, nor purchase it with gold. He earns their love by the sweat of his own back and the pains he endures for their sake. That which comprises the harshest burden, a king lifts first and sets down last. A king does not require service of those he leads, but provides it to them. He serves them, not they him. If you are that kind of leader, I'm telling you, your people will follow you to the gates of hell.
100%. Yeah, it couldn't. I mean, obviously, I couldn't say it better. It's a fantastic quote. And it's a fantastic message that I absolutely believe. Take care of people. I've worked with folks and said, listen, you don't work for me. Like, I know how the org chart is. It's fine, but you don't work for me. Let me be clear. I work for you. All right, because of two things. I mean, I have to believe in it. I've always told people, I'm the iron umbrella. Everything's going to fall on me. I'm going to keep you safe. All I ask of you is please tell me if you think things are coming, so I get ahead of it. I don't want to catch bullets in the back. But my job is to give you what you need to be successful and then get out of the way and get everybody else out of the way so that you can do that. I believe in that. But the other thing I've told teams is, listen, you guys can get me fired a lot faster than I get you fired. I don't want to fire anybody anyway. But just understand, if all of you decide I'm an asshole, I'm getting fired. Like, that's how it's going to work in healthy orgs. You all start saying you don't want me here, I won't be here. So, you get to decide who runs this place. My job is to, like I said, serve the people and give you what you need. My role and my title, all that does is give me more opportunity to help other people, right? And that's the goal and that's the objective. And I've worked in some organizations where, people, and that's normally my opening line when I come in, and you can see the room full of people, and they, because they've been in corporate world a while, they go, yeah, whatever. It's, it's like the core values. And you're like, and I've told people, I don't expect you to believe a word I'm saying right now. I'm not worried about that at all. You'll see it. You got to live the experience. I got to live my words, and then you'll see it. And the first time I end up getting in the way of a bullet or something, you'll go, geez, I guess it's kind of serious. And that's totally fine. You got to prove it, right? But I'm a big believer in, like you said, if you do that, people will listen. And to me, leadership isn't about power. It's not control. It's just about trying to help people. I don't. That's all I want to do is make the world a better place. And there's so many poisonous and toxic work environments and self-serving people. And I just I don't want that. I just want to be in a position where people go, okay, here's a place where I can go and I cannot hate every day, every minute of every day. I just want to go in and do good work, and I can trust, if things go wrong, it'll happen. Like, don't worry, just tell me so we can get in front of it. It's not a big deal. It's not, unless it was malicious, and, it's fine. Accidents happen. Let's just get in front of it. That's a healthy thing. Otherwise, you have organizations where people just hide everything because they're afraid, toxic organizations where people rule by fear. Then, you end up with like a Saddam Hussein to get to the, the biggest part. Saddam Hussein, picked a fight, went to war basically because he thought he had technologies he didn't have because none of his people told him he didn't have it because the last people that told him he didn't have it, he killed. After that, nobody gives him bad news. So he thinks he's got this whole burgeoning weapons program that doesn't exist because the last people he said couldn't do it, he killed them. Well, next people kept telling him he had progress. That's how it works. And that's how it'll work in any environment. If leaders, will rule by fear, people won't tell them, as you said, it'll stay silent. So I'm curious now, transitioning a little bit, same topic, but when we talk about we're talking about leadership specifically in tech. Now, I've heard you say before that you think the biggest cybersecurity risk isn't technology. It's not endpoints and malware, and it's people. So, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Why do you think the biggest security risk today is actually people?
Well, as you know, when we talk about technology, especially cybersecurity, we kind of have three pillars, right? It's the people, which I think is the most important one, but there's technology and then the governance, policies, and so forth. I think we are only really as strong as our weakest link, right? That is why.
No, it's true, though. It's very true.
Yeah, because people use social engineering, and that's how you can have the best technology in the world. If I cannot hack your system, I can't hack your firewall, but I can hack your people, then I will have access. They're just going to give me the keys to the kingdom, right? And there are many ways you could do that. If you are good with human relationship and even manipulation, you can pretty much get people to do exactly what you want them to do. So really, if you even look throughout our history, really every major breach you can think of, at least everyone that I have traced, really goes back to human decision. I believe it was IBM, that was maybe in 2021, 22. They used to have an annual report, I don't know if they still do that, where they say that 99% of all of the breaches that were due to some type of human error.
Oh, sure.
Right. Ignore warning, engineers go silent, they don't speak up when they should, misaligned incentives, or leaders prioritizing speed, image, or cost over risk. And also, even here in Silicon Valley, for the most part, when I was a CISO, I usually reported to engineering, the VP of engineering or the chief technology officer. And he's my boss. So I'm telling him, hey, we have this critical vulnerability. I believe we need to focus on it and fix it. It's like, no, I have another priority, maybe later. So what do you do, right? Because leadership really determines whether these failures are anticipated, mitigated, or ignored. So that's why I believe that people believe the biggest risk far above technology.
Well, exactly. And then I'll give you one more example, and then I want a follow-up. But I've talked about business email compromise. Right? The world talks a lot about ransomware, right? It gets all the headlines, all the news. But business email compromise causes exponentially more damage, 10 times, 50 times. I can't remember what the numbers are these days, but they're much, much larger and doesn't get talked about much. And my personal opinion has always been, and I've told people, business email compromise, and by the way, for anybody who's listening or watching who doesn't know what I'm saying, business email compromise is a phishing attack that eventually tricks somebody into giving away money, either paying a bill that doesn't exist or it's always something to that effect. But the reason it happens is because
link, download attachment,
exactly. And the reason it happens is because of a cultural issue. A lot of times, a lot of the stereotypical is somebody leaning into accounts payable and saying, I'm the CEO and I need you just to pay this right now, send this money to this place, whatever. And that person's nervous but they try to say no, and the CEO leans on them.
Or you on that. I have a very good story.
Oh yeah, Well, let me finish this real quick because they may relate. But I've told people, I said the challenge there is in that moment, the person in accounts payable has to decide their own personal risk. What am I more likely to get fired for? Saying no to the CEO or sending money where it shouldn't go? Because this guy's yelling in my ear. And I think a lot of these happen because it's culture, because the answer is, hey, I'm better off just send the money. It's not my money. They probably won't blame me. They probably won't fire me. If I say no to the CEO and it's him, I'm getting fired. Whereas I've said, listen, if you have a culture that says, here's two things. One, in order for any money to move, somebody has to give the daily code, whatever. It could be the most simple thing. It doesn't matter. It could be rudimentary. It's enough to slow these down. And two, I don't care who's the one asking. I don't care how loud and aggressive they get. Every person in the organization has the authority and is protected from any harm for saying no. And that's it. In a CEO, and maybe it really is the CEO, maybe it really is urgent. Well, you should have had the code. That's how it works. Now you have accountability as a leader to do your part. If that happened, business email compromise would almost be evaporated, because that person wouldn't have any of the pressure when the threat actors come in and they scream and they yell and whatever. The person would just chuckle and go, well, I know you're not the CEO. I know you're not that person because you'd have the code, and you also wouldn't be getting more and more mad at me because I can't do anything about it and I'm protected. So it would end this. But the culture, I think, is a bigger issue than the technology. So I'm curious about your story that relates to it, though.
No, you are absolutely right. But also now, it might be even more difficult now because of AI and deepfake. Some people can really make you believe things that are absolutely not true. But what happened to me, a company in Silicon Valley, shall we name nameless, but what happened is the person was reporting directly to, we call them head of people, basically chief human resources officer. And the CHRO was only like 3 feet down from where their desk was. As you know, in Silicon Valley, usually have open floor plan and everything. And anyway, this person gets an email supposedly from the CEO asking them to send the CEO the entire W-2 form for
all of the tax scams you get every year. Yep, the entire payroll,
and then,
right?
Yeah, without thinking, she just went ahead, sent. So that means my tax information, including my full social security number,
gone.
Even to this hacker. And what I didn't understand is, your boss is only 2-3 feet away.
You could walk over and confirm it.
Exactly. So sometimes I guess you can't really help stupid. But the consequences, though, what happened for all of us employees for that company, they try to pay for 2 or 3 years for monitoring, but that doesn't very much after the fact. Because that year I was actually on orders. I was in Japan. I was in Yokosuka, Japan. April comes around. I'm okay. I need to go quickly do my taxes first week of April before the 15th. And for the first time in my life, I say submit, and the IRS comes back and says, Bob Zinga, you've already done your taxes. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, I didn't. Basically, they use my social security number, and then they try to steal money from the government. So since that day, every single time I do my taxes now, the IRS has to send me a very special PIN number, and I have to use that PIN number every single time, whether I do it by hand or electronically, so they know it is me, and they know to send me my money back. So my life is affected for the rest of my life now, permanently, because of that. So I guess more and more people see the impact, right, of data breaches and hacking, and they see why it is important, why security and privacy is actually important at a personal level, not just for the organization and not just for the customer, but for each individual too. But you really need to build that culture where people don't feel afraid to ask questions and they don't feel afraid to speak up.
100%. And I've seen a lot of those scams, and they're the people, like you said, they get affected, and it could be years later. There's these data dumps are everywhere, but it can happen at any time, and that's exactly the point. That payroll scam comes up every year in tax season. I normally have written something about it or talked to somebody and said, this is going to happen. Your accounts, not your accounts payable in this case. This will be your HR groups, your payroll group. Somebody's going to impersonate a C-level and say, I need all the W-2s or I-9s or whatever they want. The answer is always no. At least it's go check. Why? Why would the CEO need that? But putting that aside, again, it's just, you got to have a check in there. You got to have a secondary system to that, and then a culture that goes with it, right? After that security culture, where both the safety culture of people safety of, hey, you're allowed to challenge people. We appreciate that. We want that. It's in the betterment of everybody. But also the security culture of thinking security first. And hold on a second, does this make sense? What's the risk with this? Maybe I should double check on it. But I'm curious in that way, we talked a little bit, that's a security failure, obviously, and I talked a little bit already about the psychological safety and how that increases, cyber risk. But what does trust actually look like operationally in a cyber, in a security team? Not just culturally, but operationally, what does trust look like to you?
Well, a couple of things. I really believe trust is really the foundation of leadership. You cannot do anything unless there is trust. I mean, it's just a must. There is nothing beyond that. So your people, they do need to trust you. That is one. But they also need to trust one another. Now, I guess psychological safety is part of that too, that you trust that when you speak up, nobody's going to make fun of you. When you speak up, people are going to listen to what you have to say, and they are going to consider that you are an important member of the team, right? And usually, especially in the military, like you and I, we've served in uniform. We have a chain of command, and it's pretty strong. But even when I was a commanding officer, for example, I remember, because when I joined the Navy 21 years ago, I wasn't a commander. I was a seaman recruit, E1, lowest rank in the entire military. Even though as a civilian at the time, I was an IT director. I had about 12 people reporting to me. I already had a bachelor's degree. So I did have maybe no zero military experience, but I did have a lot of industry experience. At least it was quite considerable. But because my rank was E1, everybody completely ignored me, right? So I told myself I would never do that if I had the chance or an opportunity to be in charge. And that was my opportunity. So basically, I was trying to create a culture in my command to make sure that Sim and Zinga would be proud to be a member of the team. Where Sim and Zinga would have the opportunity to speak up when he or she had something to say. So I wanted to create an environment where my people would want to come there, and once they got there, they would do the very, very best work they could. Right. So you really have, again, it's not performative. You have to not the rubber meets the road. You have to be real, and people have to feel it. Building trust, modeling integrity, right? Creating belonging, right? Taking moral responsibility. I think people can really feel that, and you cannot fake it, right? I really think trust in cybersecurity is so important because every major breach, traces back to human decision, like I mentioned earlier. So you can patch a system, but you cannot patch human. I guess the best thing we can do is really training and trying to build that culture where it's inclusive and people really feel like they can, right, participate and they have kind of skin in the game. So to me, it also has to do with clear escalation path, right? Leaders who back their people publicly and blameless postmortem. I don't want to assign blame. I just want to know what is the problem and how do we fix it. Because as a leader, if one of your people makes a mistake, you made
it's your fault. Yeah, it's your responsibility as a leader. Yeah, absolutely.
When the team does the right thing, then you share the glory with everybody on the team publicly, right? Decision that prove that security voices really, really do matter, not just during incident, but during planning and budgeting as well. So that's what I think trust is like.
No, I agree. I had one commander, and that was very early in my career, and that was exactly how he led. All failures are mine, all successes are yours, and I've always tried to model that because I really believe in it. Because again, yes, if you're in leadership, ultimately it's all yours. Like it has to be if you're an ethical leader. Maybe I don't understand that particular technology or that job. I don't do everything everybody in the team does, but ultimately it's on me. I didn't provide them enough training, enough guidance, enough mentorship. A technical mentor obviously wouldn't be me, but it's ultimately got to be my responsibility. And if things go well, it's everybody's. You pass it to the people that did the most and make sure they get the credit because they're the ones in the front lines doing the hard work. I'm a big believer in that. I think that's something that we really have to continue to work on. And you talk about that trust, right? And that ability to build that trust and to make sure that you live that way all the time, right? And that's that's organizations that don't have that aren't particularly secure organizations. Usually, people end up hiding more and more things.
Absolutely,
so that's how you get people to try to pay ransomware on their own on the side because they don't want somebody to know they got hit because they're embarrassed or ashamed or they're worried about what happened. And you end up with that's how you end up with all this architecture that's not covered.
Resilience, yeah.
Because
another thing you said sometimes when I hire people, I don't really care much about technical skill because I can teach you that, especially the way it's done in my organization. But character, I cannot. Right? Either you got it or you don't. So I would say hire for character and then train for skills. Because I'd rather, I guess that's probably how I got my first chance into IT back in 1997, over 28 years ago. Because it's like that catch-22, right? It's like, hey, I want this job. I want to do this IT work. It's like, do you have any experience? No, I don't have any experience. Well, how can I get experience unless you give me the job first?
Exactly.
So, then you kind of have, no, you are hungry, you are a good person, you have integrity, I can trust you and I can teach you. And then, all of this technical stuff you can learn. But anyway, I think.
No, I agree. I hire people for the people. Within reason, obviously, you have to have some basics. We all know that. I'm not saying you hire anybody to do anything, but I'm a big believer in that. I've talked to people like, I only want to hire rock stars. I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not building a rock band, so that's a weird way to hire people. But at the same time, I don't know if that's a great idea. We've seen that. Hey, we've seen that in sports. You get a whole team full of stars, and they can't work together. If you hire all stars, everybody's A players, then everybody expects to be at the top. You're gonna have a really competitive environment. I coached high school football, and I used to say to people, do your job. Right. I want people in the right spots. It's not more or less valuable, but if everybody wanted to be the quarterback, we wouldn't have much of a football team. Do your job. Let's get people in the right places. And, if somebody's really good at what they do, but hey, they don't want to work extra hours. They're not big on overtime. They're doing their thing and they're leaving. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. They're probably not going to advance a lot necessarily. I mean, they might technically, but they might not. But they're fine with that. And I'm fine with that. I don't want to vilify that person. They're part of the team. They're doing their piece. And you mentioned, like rank in the military. It's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happens in the civilian world. And I've always said to people, the right answer is the right answer. I don't care where it comes from. It often won't come from me. If I'm in the room and I say something and it's stupid, tell me it's stupid, and tell me in front of people. I don't mind. I got the skin for that. You don't have to do it with everybody, but I'm not right just because I'm the person in the role or in the seat. And I was lucky enough. I was in the Air Force, as you mentioned. Air Force a little different from some services. We're kind of the corporate military, depending on who you ask. They build
you guys always build the golf course.
Build the golf course first, and then the base around it, exactly. And then on top of that, I was intel. But one of the things I was lucky enough is it's one of the few areas I think in the military where rank. I mean, you have to be respectful, but you can disagree as far up as you want if you're right in intel, because intel is intel. And early in my days, I was a linguist. I wasn't particularly
people could die. 100%.
Yeah, but I was having an argument. I will tell you, I was an E3 at the time, so Airman First Class, and I'm having an argument with a disagreement, I guess, with a captain or major. It was a captain, I believe, Air Force major, so 03. And he's basically telling me to shut up and color, and I can't because I know he's wrong in this case. I don't have a choice, and it ends up going to the commander, which I didn't really want it to. And
permission to speak freely.
Yeah, well, that wasn't going very well. But ultimately, what it came down to is the captain had an opinion, I had an opinion, and the commander asked me my thoughts, and I said, "Well, you've invested, $250,000 or $500,000 to teach me the language and the culture and all the things about this country," because I was a linguist, and I'm pretty confident the captain doesn't have all that information. So yes, I believe I'm correct on this. And he told the captain to shut up and sit down. And that was sort of the end of the captain and I never really got along, but that was that's okay. His career ended poorly. Yeah. That's a whole different story. But that was the point, was if you're right and you can support it, right? Don't just come and say, I think I'm right. But if you can support it, the right answer has got to be the right answer. And that particular captain, who didn't last long in the military, wasn't much of a leader, was wrong, but didn't want to admit that. And I have the rank. I'm telling you what to do. Just do it. Didn't have any of the requisite knowledge to have the disagreement. This was a discussion about a foreign language, information in a foreign language related to a culture that this person knew neither of those things. And even as a poor linguist, I knew these things well enough to know he was wrong. So having a culture to say, listen, the right answer is the right answer. I work in tech a lot. I don't write code. I'm not technical in those ways. I have different skill sets. Tell me what the right answers are. And, I'm not going to lean in and tell you you're wrong. The point is to get the talent in the right places. It doesn't matter what you have on your sleeve or on your collar, or, what your title says on your business card. The right answer has to be the right answer.
Yes. Actually, from what you say, I have another story. It really humbled me. I think for the entire time I was really privileged and honored to be a commanding officer. The number one leadership lesson I've learned is you have to lead with humility. Mm-hmm. Because in my life, over and over again, I usually start at the very, very bottom, from E1 to 05, from most junior enlisted to now a senior officer in the most powerful Navy. I started as a tech assistant, pretty much an intern, and now I am a chief information security officer in Silicon Valley. But the thing is, as you achieve more and more and you get more and more responsibilities, sometimes your head tends to get big, and you are so proud, and your ego kind of gets out of check, and you absolutely do not. You have to be humble. You have to lead with humility, because what's going to happen is your ego is going to prevent you from learning, whereas humility is going to accelerate growth and learning. So for your own sake, you should be humble. Right? In the military, I'm sure we stole that from the Army. The more senior I become, it looks like we steal a bunch of ideas from the Army. But the 3 C's of leadership, right? Confidence, which is good. You do have to be confident as a leader. Sure. For some people, their confidence is just way out of bound, right? And then, in addition to confidence, you need to have the second C, which is competence. You have to be good. You need to know what you are doing. You have to perform, right? You have to actually win. And then the third C, which I think is probably the most important, is connection with people and caring for them. But one story I wanted to share, I had a very important issue I couldn't solve myself. So I reached out first to my senior team, my executive officer, my senior enlisted leader. We tried to figure it out. Nothing. And then, I included all of my department heads. So that's my entire leadership team. Probably about, 12, 15 of us. We couldn't figure this thing out. It's been like months. I'm like, okay, I have to come up with a solution. So I decided to open it up to the entire troop, to the entire command. And then an E5, junior enlisted person, in less than 5 minutes came up with the solution. So wisdom doesn't respect rank. Anybody, anywhere can tell you what the solution is if you are open to it, if you are open for feedback, right? And again, that's why you do have to be humble, because from what that person said in that meeting, we were able to solve a very important problem to me. He really made my day and helped us achieve a very important portion of our mission that quarter. So you have to lead humbly. You just have to.
No, you make a really good point. When I was young, for anybody who knows me, though I know, I was pretty cocky, I guess, when I was young. I've always had confidence. Let's go with that. And maybe a bit cocky, maybe more than maybe. As I've gotten older, I feel like I've gotten, again, to say I've gotten humble sounds horrible, right? Humble people don't say it, but I feel like I've toned some of that down. I think in my case,
say you humble, you are no longer humble.
Exactly. I think what happened is I got old enough to figure out all the things I didn't know, right? It's just, the more you learn, the more you realize what you don't know. And you're like, oh my, I thought I knew a lot, but it turns out I didn't know anything, right? And the more I go through life, the more I realize how much I don't know. And it's like, okay, I got to really kind of pull it back. I'm not perfect by any means at this. And I'm still, I have my fair amount of confidence with it, but I like to think now it's more of there's a lot to this world. I know a sliver. Even if I'm good at that sliver, it's so very little comparatively. And there's so much more to learn, and there isn't enough time. And so it does become more of hey, how are we all going to get things done together? Because you're going to bring skills I don't have, and you're going to bring skills I don't have, and you're going to bring a point of view I don't have, an experience I don't have. And it's better to just say, hey, let's get the right group together of all these things. And it's not a better or worse or a more or less, as you know this and I don't, so you're smarter than me. Well, you are in that area, and it might be the same in reverse. And that's fine.
If you just keep your ego in check, you're going to be so successful. If you don't care who gets the credit.
That's right. Just get it done. Now, listen, I want to move on to another topic. What's that? Go ahead.
In the age of AI.
Yeah, that's what I'm heading. Is the next one. Yeah, the age of AI.
Knowledge is really exponential. It's impossible to know everything very soon. For example, when I was a PhD student, now I am what they call ABD, all but the dissertation. That was 26 years ago, year 2000 to 2001. I was a candidate for PhD in microbiology, University of Alabama.
Wow.
My primary mentor, he had his PhD back in the late 70s, early 80s. It told me 20 years ago, I knew absolutely everything there was to know about microbiology, everything.
Not anymore.
Doctor. But today, 20 years later, he's like, no, it's just impossible. So really one of the master skills I have is the ability to ask questions and find answers. I may not know all of the answers, but I kind of know where I should be seeking to get those solutions. But I guess I'm saying all of this to say, in the age of AI, we really need each other. And sometimes you will be surprised where the solution would be coming from. It has nothing to do with rank. It has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with gender or race. But you have to be open for the answer. And I think it will eventually come to you if you are humble enough to listen. Because you're right. I think Socrates, I believe, is the first one who said it, right? The more I know, the more I know that I don't know
exactly.
anything.
Yeah. You become aware, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And as you said, it's knowledge is exponential, right? It's you can't know everything. The person who gets the doctorate and is the top of their field today, if they never studied another thing, in 10 years, everything they know will be baseline. I mean, some of it might still exist. Some of it might be erased by other science even.
Absolutely.
But they definitely won't know what's going on today, right? So it's that constant learning. But in terms of AI, I'm curious, as we're moving into this whole age of AI, what worries you the most about AI adoption that leaders aren't actually talking about enough publicly right now? I mean, everybody's jumped in. There's no problem hearing about AI. It's going to do this, it's going to do that. It's amazing, and it's going to change the world forever. And we're all going to be superhumans on it. But what to you? What are the things leaders aren't talking about enough that concerns you in this move?
Yeah, I think in the age of AI, we just said knowledge is really exponential. It's impossible to know everything. I kind of envy my grandparents, right? Because back then, they didn't even need to have a high school degree. And when they did, that's really all they needed. And they were set for life. Never have to open another book in their life. But in our generation, that's not the case. You can have a PhD to doctorate. It doesn't matter. You're going to keep on learning because that's just the kind of world we live in. Where I am in Silicon Valley, pretty much every 6 months or so, there is new innovation, new technology. So basically, I'm going to be a student for life. That is a given. So what worries me most about AI adoption? Well, one thing that worries me is we might be automating bias, right? Accelerating decision without reflection and really confusing efficiency with wisdom. I think that's something that worries me more and more. Because in this age of AI, another thing that's very important, I believe, really is ethics, right? Ethical responsibility, especially when it comes to cyber security. Because there's got to be some type of accountability, right? Because that doesn't disappear just because the system made the decision for you. So, and especially in the military, to me, human oversight is crucial. It's absolutely critical. We cannot be having those machines making decisions and then shooting missiles all over the place. No. There's got to be some human oversight. Now, I know AI is going to help you be more efficient, right? Do things faster, but you still need to have the control with the human touch, because I believe leaders are responsible for outcomes, not for excuses.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point in there, accountability. So years ago now, when I was still in the government space, I worked on a project at one point. I was hired to work with this team that was building a capability that was called cyber intelligence preparation of the environment. Originally, it was cyber intelligence preparation of the battle space, but SecDef didn't like in cyber being called the battle space then. But then it became the environment, and eventually it became kill chain. But the concept at the time, a lot of it had automation, and the idea was, we had a lot of operations researchers and scientists and brilliant people, and the idea was to create, to map paths and patterns. And really, originally, it was kind of going to be a magic box where you put information in and it would tell you the answer. And I remember when they first hired me, I was like, I don't know why you hired me. I'm an intel guy. I don't know the math you're talking about. I'm not an operations researcher. Am I in the wrong interview room? And they said, no, we have the people for all these things. We need some intel people. We need to validate if this will actually happen, if it'll work, et cetera. I was like, okay, great. And we started, and I said, this will never work. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, no intelligence person worth their salt will take the machine's answer. The magic box said so, and then go do something with it. I got to put bombs on targets, or I got to do things kinetically. I said, unless you can show me the workings, if you can show me the back end and how it all works, and I can trust it, then that's fine. It's really, really fast. It can be faster for me, et cetera. But without that, I'm going to take your answer. I'm going to go back and re-engineer the whole thing. I'm going to reverse engineer the whole thing, go back to the beginning to prove it anyway. I've got to validate it all, because eventually my name goes on it. And if it goes out and a bomb goes on a target and people die, I can't say, it turns out it wasn't the right target. I can't say, well, the box said so. And now I look ahead now, I look at where we are now, 10 years later or whatever, and I go, well, apparently now we're just going to do that. Apparently now that's where we are. AI just tells us we're just going to make these decisions, and nobody's, asking what's under the hood. And we couldn't understand it if they showed it to us half the time. And people are just saying, yeah, all right, the box said so, and we're going to do it. And I worry about where that accountability is going to be. Our leader's just going to hide behind it and say, well, the box said to do it. We brought this technology in, blame the vendor, who's going to say, well, hey, we got a little thing at the bottom that says it's not always right. You're supposed to double check this stuff. Well, how am I going to double check, the million lines that you just handed me on the short term that I have to work with? And it was very convincing. Where are we going to land, do you think, in terms of, ethics and accountability? And again, you also talked about, bias. I worry about, when I was in the intel world, if you had one analyst who didn't properly apply standards, some people knew that. Be like, all right, don't talk to him, because every time you talk to him, he's going to tell you it's Russia. It doesn't matter what it is. He'll always say that. Or it's always China or whatever. You're like, that person's so biased. Save it until we think it might actually be there and let him go down that path.
Yes.
And that was fine. But now, if you get that stuff poured into an AI, the entire organization has that same bias, right? Especially if you're eliminating intel people and just letting the AI be your intel team now. Now, one bias became everybody's bias. And it's not that hard to poison some of these technologies and poison some of these inputs. So, where do you think we're going to land in terms of accountability and ethics and, oversight on these things? Humans are designed to just go fast and easy, and we're being pressured for all this, volume. Are we just going to end up succumbing to it until terrible, terrible things happen repeatedly and we recognize it's a mistake? Or do you think we're going to be able to get ahead of this and understand the importance of oversight and ethics and human involvement in these things still?
Yes, and actually, I am writing an article now. It should be published today. Or I'm thinking deeply about AI and how we get to trust them. I've already written one where people feel like AI is alive,
right?
And absolutely isn't. But that's the impression some people have, and also there is psychosis as
AI
well.
Psychosis, sure. I wrote something on that a while back. Yeah.
Actually, I think just very recently, it was actually University of San Francisco. For the first time, somebody was diagnosed by what they called, I think, AI-aided psychosis. Basically, some people are really losing their mind because AI tends to please, right? And I think they can become delusion accelerator. So we really have to be careful about that. That psychophancy is always being the yes man and trying to please, and then mistaking a simulation for sentience, thinking that they are alive. I guess it's also called anthropomorphism, right? And also there is also the being isolated, sometimes sleep deprived and trying to feel like you are developing an actual relationship with a machine.
Sure.
And it's kind of like a perfect storm for mental health. But again, the very first clinically described AI-associated psychosis was done here at UCSF. And it was a 26-year-old woman who was convinced that she could bring back the AI twin of her dead brother.
Yep.
And it is just crazy, but it really could happen to anyone. Of course, we've heard also of the case of the 14-year-old, right, in Florida, fell in love with AI chatbot and decided to commit suicide so they could meet in AI heaven and have kids or whatever. So it really can be very dangerous. And already some lives have been lost. So that's why you really need ethics, and you really need not just to think about profit and capability, but not only what are we doing, but are we doing the right thing, and then how to do it. Because I think safety, privacy, security, and ethics are very crucial, very important. Actually, it was today. Eric Schmidt, I'm sure
Oh, yeah.
you know. I've never met him, but he's my mentor from afar. I really appreciate everything he's done and the work he's doing with AI now. He had a post today, and I mostly agree with what he says. It's Eric Schmidt after all. But basically, he was saying that, America is on the right path. We are moving forward with AI, and China is doing their thing, but Europe is kind of paralyzed. They have just too many regulation and things, and they don't have any infrastructure. So what I told him, I don't know if he's going to reply, but I mostly agree with everything he was saying. But the nuance I wanted to tell him, again, no, he's a legend. He's a living legend. No, who am I to talk to him? But based on everything I have learned what I'm studying, because I think about these things pretty deeply. I told Eric that the nuance for me is that in Europe, they don't just need to get in the game, which I think they do, but on AI infrastructure. However, they also need to get in the right game, right? Doing it the right way. Because a massive investment in compute, energy, and open model is non-negotiable if Europe wants technological sovereignty. But talent without, silicon power and scale will always migrate to where execution is possible. So I think we are aligned on that. But I do believe the bottom line is infrastructure without trust. We were talking about trust, about that will not win the long game. Maybe temporarily, but not the long game. So I think we need both. We need to have those guardrails. That's kind of the way I look at security, right? DevSecOps or SecDevOps. Yeah, you want to move fast at the speed of light or thought. That's fine. But we need to have those guardrails. As long as you are within these guardrails, you can move as fast as you need to. Where security doesn't stop innovation, right? It's not the Department of No, but we do have some guardrails, and you have to move within those.
Yeah, it makes sense. And because AI showed up, it apparently to the outside world, at least, I know it's been developed for a while, but commercially, it just felt like it just arrived, right? And everybody just got handed all these tools, and not much training, not much oversight. A lot of it was free at first, so it just handed people all this stuff. I fear, and because that raised so much money and the valuation so quickly, that we're going to be doing this in reverse. Like the cart is ahead of the horse now, and we're going to have to turn around and get out in front of this. I think the audits, the AI accountability, AI audit, AI oversight, LLM management, some of these things. These are going to be growth areas, for work, because somebody's got to be the gatekeepers of these. And somebody's got to be a neutral gatekeeper. You can't have the company that invented the technology also be the ones to tell you, no, it's safe. Don't worry. That's a bad idea. We don't have car manufacturers rate their own cars for safety. We have somebody else that does that, because otherwise, I promise, they would all give themselves very high marks on their safety. There's a reason we have agencies to do that. We're going to need the same thing for these things. Nuclear regulatory agency, things like that. We don't let people manufacture potentially dangerous things, not inherently dangerous, but potentially, to also tell us they're safe, right? And right now, it feels like that's where we're at. Is they're going, no, trust us, and here's some policies. And most people, including power users, in some cases, really don't know how a lot of this stuff works behind the scenes. We're figuring out as we go along. We're prompt engineering, and oh my goodness, that shouldn't have been the answer we got for that, should it? Early on, I knew people who could. They say you can't do these dangerous things with it. Nah, with the right prompting, you can get AI to tell you a lot of things. It can it'll tell you how to build a bomb step by step. It just doesn't know it's telling you that. And of course, then they go and they fix that, and then you find a new way to trick it into telling you dangerous things.
Exactly.
And doing things that are supposedly against the rules. So I suspect
so we definitely need sensible regulation for sure. One of the latest article I wrote, I think it was last week, it was about surveillance, security, and really the leader's dilemma. This article was specifically focusing on ICE, how they have so much technology now, and they can get so much information, not just on non-illegal immigrant, but on U.S. citizen as well. So how do you balance that? Because the truth is, our laws are way outdated. Technology, is far ahead. We are not. Was it Privacy Act of 1974? We are in 2026.
74. So fax
we definitely need an upgrade, right? And we need those laws to kind of keep up with technology and the modern times.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. One last bit, and then I'm going to get us closed out of here. Just to touch on the AI psychosis you mentioned. So about a year ago, a little less maybe, I'd have to go look up the dates, but some friends of mine and I were talking about some of this stuff, and a good friend, a bright guy, wrote a really interesting piece on LinkedIn about this. was ahead of me. I was in the process of writing something. He beat me to it. He didn't steal my ideas or anything. He wrote his own thing. So I made some slight changes, but I wrote something that actually was, here's a selfish plug. It's on the Unspoken Security blog, Security Whispers. I wrote a piece on this, did a bunch of research on it. I actually tied it to insider threat. So I took a lot of what we knew, but said, hey, this is how insider threat's going to be forever changed, because a lot of things we believe and plan on, well, they're also based on a rational actor. When you have somebody who's gone down this AI psychosis path, everything changes. It's a very different thing. Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And then right behind that, the New York Times wrote an interesting article on this piece as well. So AI psychosis is a problem that people should look into. I think it's more likely to affect people who already have pre-existing mental health issues, maybe under the surface, but it could affect others. And as you said, you can go way down the path. You can believe things that are just very dangerous and all fictitious, well beyond just falling in love with
I believe
AI.
was it the founder of Uber at one point he thought he had discovered the secret of the universe.
Yes, exactly.
That's really crazy.
Yeah, it's you can go very, very, very dangerous and scary places with this. And again, the guardrails. I know of somebody who went down this path, and I've gone through, and officially these platforms have rules that, if they see this kind of behavior, they're supposed to shut you off. Yeah. And I've got reams and reams of printouts that say, well, this should have violated the policies, got to shut off, but they didn't. Well, the platforms, first of all, they're very big. They may not have all the oversight they need yet, even internally. And they're not necessarily motivated to shut people off who are paying. I'm not saying that was all intentional or anything. That's why I'm not naming platforms, not pointing fingers. But there's a lot to ask there to ask the platform to self-manage these things, and don't count on the policies to be those solutions. But listen, we're going to wrap up here. We're running out of time. We could do this for hours. I absolutely would. You're fascinating. I could talk to you about AI. I could talk to you about tech. I could talk to you about leadership. It's amazing. And it's been a fantastic conversation. But as we're drawing to a close, now the name of the show is Unspoken Security. And as you know, everybody gets asked the same question to close out. So with that in mind, tell me something you've never told anyone before, something that till now has been unspoken.
Well, that is something I don't say often. I guess there were moments in my careers, both in uniform and in tech, where staying silent would have probably made my life easier.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
Speaking up for people, for inclusion, for fairness, might cost me political capital. But sometimes as a leader, it's not about politics, but it is about doing the right thing. Back to what your core values. Who are you as a human being? What are your core values? What do you stand on? I am an immigrant. I came from another country. I wanted to be American. Right now, it seems like we are losing a lot of the freedom we've taken for granted for a very, very long time, which is very sad. But again, right is right. It doesn't matter. Like I really loved, I think it was John McCain again. I'm not Democrat or Republican or
sure, won't matter, yeah.
One thing he said, and I know he was a naval officer, so good for him. He's like, country before party. I think we need to go back to that place where we are U.S. citizens first and foremost. So much in common, right? Whether you are black, white, woman, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. We have this one thing in common, being one nation under God. That should mean something to each and every one of us, regardless of your party affiliation or your belief. So I think every time the temptation wasn't fear, right? Maybe it's fatigue, right? But really what I've learned is silence doesn't keep you safe. It just delays accountability. We've been talking about trust and accountability for quite a while. So what's unspoken for many leaders, I think, is they know what is right, but they are afraid of being alone when they do it. So leadership isn't about being fearless, because I think everybody feels the fear, but the courage. That's why my core value is honor, courage. You have to have that courage, because yes, I am afraid just like everybody else, but I will act in spite of my fear, right? It's about deciding what you are willing to stand for, even if you stand alone. That's very powerful. So especially in cybersecurity, where trust, I think, is everything, where people are watching what you protect and what you are willing to sacrifice. So that's
I mean, you're right. It's incredibly powerful. It's and pervasive. I've certainly seen that. It's, as you said, it's not about being fearless. If somebody who's fearless, they're probably they're psychotic. Then, like we're supposed to have fear. It's part of us. Courage isn't being fearless. Courage is the strength to overcome that fear and still do what needs to be done. Whether that's physical or that's, doing the right thing, as you pointed out here, and obviously for those who haven't paid attention, I got, if you're watching the show, I've got my Minnesota shirt on. I have several. I'm from Minnesota and I live in Minnesota. So with all the things that are going on, there's a lot of people being tested right now on doing the right thing, doing the ethical thing,
Absolutely.
Whether it's the politically correct thing, whether it's the safe and secure thing, there are some things
what
that
I
are
would
just
say
right.
is do the human thing.
Yeah.
Do the human thing. Because I think courage is contagious. Because sometimes
100%.
everybody's paralyzed by fear because, usually what people do, they will use somebody as an example and just chastise them. And many people, I am afraid, what if it happened to me? But if you have the courage to speak, guess what? You're going to give permission to everybody else to have the courage to speak as well. Because I think leadership isn't proven by what you post. It is proven by what you preserve. Your values, your people, your integrity. When it would be easier to let them go. That's leadership.
100%. I couldn't say it better. Not going to say anything after that other than thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being you. I thank you for being such a great leader. I think we need more. The Navy, I'm sure, could use some more. Everybody could, and so could Silicon Valley. So I'm glad you're there doing these great things. And thank you for taking the time to be here and to share your wisdom. I really appreciate you. And this has been a fantastic conversation. For anybody out there who's listening or watching, I hope you've enjoyed the show. Feel free to let us know, send feedback, please, like and subscribe and all the good things. If you don't like the show, don't tell anybody. I don't need any bad press. Just keep that to yourself. But you could at least privately let me know why you didn't, and I'll try to make things better. The show isn't about me. It's about the guests, and it's about who has, the time and energy to sit and listen and watch, to try to hopefully put out, content that matters. It's meaningful and it's entertaining and it's interesting and it's educational. So, thank you everybody for taking the time to do that. Thank you again, BZ, for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So for everybody out there, this has been another episode of Unspoken Security.
That's a wrap for this episode of Unspoken Security. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.